The first lie did not sound like a lie. It sounded polished, successful, safe. Daniel is consulting overseas now, my daughter-in-law Lauren would say with that calm, pleasant smile of hers. Mostly Europe, sometimes Asia. You know how those firms are. People nodded. I nodded too. My son had always been ambitious, so the story fit him too neatly to question. At 64, recently widowed, I did not have the strength to interrogate happiness when it was handed to me in a shape I could live with. I told neighbors Daniel was doing well. I told old friends I was proud of him. I repeated it often enough that the story began to feel less like something I had been told and more like something I had chosen. But pride has a quiet cousin. Doubt. And doubt lives in the gaps. Daniel stopped calling, then texting, then replying to emails at all. Every time I asked Lauren, she had an answer ready before I finished the question. Different time zones, secure contracts. No personal devices allowed. Heavy travel, confidential work, reasonable answers, too reasonable. At night, alone in the house my wife Margaret and I built together, I would sit in the dark and stare at Daniel's childhood photos and feel the old pull of something I had ignored before. A low warning beneath my ribs, the sense that I was making the same mistake twice. Margaret had seen something in Lauren years earlier. Nothing she could prove, nothing dramatic, just a look in her eye one evening over tea. "There's something off about her," she had said. I had dismissed it because life is easier when suspicion stays abstract. Easier when it belongs to the dead and not the living. Easier when love can keep wearing the face of trust. If I had asked harder questions then, maybe my son would not have vanished right under my nose. The package that shouldn't exist. The morning everything changed was a Saturday. I was at the farmer's market, the same one I had visited every week since Margaret died. Same stalls, same music, same polite small talk, same arrangement of ordinary things pretending life was still ordinary. I was choosing apples when I felt someone step too close behind me. "Mr. Bennett?" I turned. The man standing there was in his 30s wearing a delivery uniform. He looked like someone who had not slept well in weeks. His eyes moved past me, over my shoulder, toward the crowd. "Yes?" He swallowed. "Are you Daniel Bennett's father?" My chest tightened so fast it felt mechanical, as if some hidden gear inside me had jammed. "I am." He looked around again, then held out a small brown package. No logo. No return address. "I wasn't supposed to find you like this," he said quietly. "But I can't keep carrying this." I took the package without thinking. "Who are you?" "Doesn't matter." His voice dropped lower. "Whatever story they told you, it isn't true. Open this alone. Don't let anyone else see it." "Who is they?" But he had already stepped back. Not rushed, not panicked. Final. Like a man who had crossed a line he could never uncross. I stood there holding that package while the noise of the market came rushing back around me. Laughter, music, vendors calling out prices, children running between tables, apples in my left hand, a secret in my right. I drove home on autopilot. The package sat on the passenger seat beside me like another person in the truck. Every red light felt too long. Every passing car seemed to slow down. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were shaking hard enough that I had to sit still for a full minute before I could trust them. Inside the house, the silence felt deliberate. I set the package on the kitchen table, the same table where Daniel had carved his initials when he was 12 and thought I would never notice. Then I opened it. Inside were 3 things: a folded letter, a black USB drive, and a photograph. The photograph hit first. It was Daniel. There was no mistaking him. Same eyes, same scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike at 9, same slight tilt to his mouth when he looked tired. But everything else was wrong. He was thinner, pale, not older in the natural way, older in the way people age when time stops belonging to them. He was holding a newspaper, The date on it was clear. 3 months ago. My breath left me all at once. Daniel had not been overseas. He had not been too busy. He had not been unreachable. He had been somewhere close enough for a newspaper to matter and trapped enough for the date to be proof. Behind him was a bare concrete wall under harsh white light. No windows, no softness. Nothing human in it except him. I stared at the photograph until my vision blurred. Then I reached for the letter. The man who should have stayed silent. The first line of the letter made my stomach drop. My name is Noah Mercer. I should not be writing this. The handwriting was hurried and uneven, as if every word had been written with one ear turned toward a hallway. Noah explained that he worked as an independent delivery driver. Medical supplies, sealed paperwork, cash jobs, routes that asked no questions. One route had repeated for more than a year, a private care facility just outside Spokane, always paid in cash, always under the same client name, Lauren Bennett. For over a year, he wrote, he had delivered sealed packages to that facility on her behalf. He never asked what was inside, never wanted to know. Then one day, while a staff member was signing paperwork, he caught sight of a man through a secured door. He read the name on the file clipped to the wall beside it. Daniel Bennett. I had to read that line twice. Noah described Daniel standing there inside the room. Not restrained, not sedated, not incoherent, just still. Too still. Like a man who had learned that protest only gave other people more language to use against him. Then came the sentence that changed the shape of everything. He did not look sick. He looked silenced. Noah wrote that he had been warned not to talk, warned that previous people who asked questions had regretted it, but he could not unsee Daniel's face. I have a family, the letter ended, but your son deserves at least one person who didn't look away. I lowered the paper and stared at the USB drive. This was not just a lie Lauren had told. It was a system that expected silence from everyone it touched. And something else landed a second later, colder than the first realization. Someone had already tried to make sure this package never reached me. She had been inside my house. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. There was one folder. Inside it were dated files. The first video opened automatically. I was looking at my own kitchen, not live, recorded. The timestamp read, Tuesday, 2:14 p.m. I knew exactly where I had been that afternoon. Book club at the library. On the screen, my back door opened. Lauren stepped inside. Not like a guest. Not cautiously. Not like someone trespassing. She moved with the easy certainty of a person who believed she belonged anywhere she chose to stand. She walked straight to the filing cabinet in Margaret's old study, opened it, and began photographing documents with her phone. Property records, statements, old trust files, deeds. She did not hesitate once. The next video showed her in the basement opening storage boxes I had not touched since Margaret's death. Another showed her in the hallway closet pulling down folders. Another showed her in the study again, this time taking photos for nearly 7 minutes. By the fifth clip, my hands had gone numb. She had been inside my home over and over while smiling at me over coffee, while dropping off the children, while asking how I was holding up. This was not curiosity. It was a search. I closed the laptop, then opened it again because denial had nowhere left to stand. There was one file left, a PDF medical records. At first it was all clinical language, codes, signatures, evaluation summaries. Then I saw my son's full name, Daniel James Bennett. My pulse pounded in my ears. The document stated that Daniel had suffered a severe neurological injury following an accident. It said he was incapable of managing his affairs, that he required continuous supervision, that his judgment was impaired. Then came the line that made the room go dark around me. Legal guardian, Lauren Bennett. Granted 3 days after hospital admission. 3 days. I kept reading. Visitation restricted. Communication monitored. No unsupervised contact with family members deemed emotionally destabilizing. Family members like me. At the top of the document was the admission date, 2 years, 7 months, and 1 day earlier. One day after Lauren had stood in my kitchen and told me Daniel had boarded a plane for his first overseas consulting contract. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. This was not overprotection. This was imprisonment with paperwork. And for the first time since Margaret died, I felt something inside me burn hotter than grief. Resolve. If Lauren had turned my son into a ghost, then I would become the one thing she had not planned for. A father who stopped believing the story. Smiling at the woman who stole my son. Lauren came over the next morning as if nothing had changed. Same soft sweater, same measured smile, same voice pitched at exactly the right note of concern. She brought the children with her, which somehow made the whole thing crueler. They ran into my arms laughing, unaware that their father had been hidden less than 100 miles away and taught to disappear in plain sight. Lauren watched from the doorway, studying. I understood then why she liked bringing them. They were not just family, they were cover. "How have you been holding up?" she asked. "I manage." "They help," she said, glancing toward the children. While they played in the living room, she followed me into the kitchen, casual, unhurried, precise. "I've been trying to help Daniel sort through some financial matters remotely," she said. "You know how disorganized he can be with old paperwork." There it was, the real purpose of the visit. "I was wondering," she went on lightly, "whether Margaret might have kept copies of property records, trust documents, anything like that." I kept my eyes on the coffee pot so she would not see what passed over my face. "I'm not sure," I said. "I'd have to look." Relief flickered across her expression. Tiny, fast, but real. "That would mean a lot," she said. "Maybe I could come by later this week and help you go through things." "Help me search my own house again?" "Of course," I said. After she left, I locked the door and leaned against it with my heart hammering. I was lying to her now, and I understood how dangerous that was, because if she had done this to my son, there was no reason to believe she would hesitate to do it to me. The key. My wife never threw away. I did not sleep that night. Sometime just before dawn, a memory surfaced with a force that left me sitting upright in bed. A key. Years earlier, after Margaret died, I had found it tucked inside the velvet lining of her jewelry box. There was a small paper tag attached to it in her neat handwriting. Riverside Community Bank, Box 314. At the time, grief had made everything feel like something to be handled later. Later had arrived. The bank smelled of polished wood and old paper. The clerk led me to a private room and set the metal box in front of me without asking unnecessary questions. Inside were 3 things: a thick legal document, a stack of photocopied deeds, and an envelope addressed to me in Margaret's hand. I opened the letter first. "Arthur, if you are reading this, then something has gone wrong." My throat closed. Margaret wrote about Lauren, about the things that had bothered her, the way Lauren watched Daniel, not with warmth but with calculation, the way she listened too carefully whenever money was mentioned, the way she always seemed to know which pressure point to touch in a room. Then came the sentence that made me lower the page and close my eyes. "I created a trust to protect Daniel and the children. If anyone ever tries to control his life or our assets through him, this will stop them." Even gone, my wife had been standing guard. The legal documents confirmed it. The trust was designed so that Daniel's inheritance could not be liquidated or redirected without strict oversight. It also placed significant assets beyond the reach of any spouse who tried to manipulate incapacity claims or emergency guardianship. Margaret had seen the danger before any of us had language for it, and I had ignored her. I sat alone in that bank room for a long time, holding her letter against my chest. Then I folded everything carefully, put it back in the envelope, and called the only lawyer I trusted. When the lawyer stopped talking like a friend, I did not call a random firm. I called Samuel Reeves, the attorney who had handled our wills for 20 years. The same man who had sat with Margaret at our dining room table and explained trusts in language simple enough to sound harmless until you realized how much damage they were built to prevent. He read Margaret's trust first, then the medical records, then Noah's letter. When he finally looked up, the air in his office felt colder. "Your wife was very smart," he said. Relief flickered in me and died when he did not smile. "But that is not your real problem." "What is?" He closed the folder. "What you are describing is guardianship exploitation." He explained it plainly. Adults declared incompetent by cooperative doctors, spouses or interested parties gaining legal control in days, facilities billing for confinement, lawyers protecting the structure, medical language used as a cage, paperwork turned into a wall harder to break through than any locked door. "And the worst part," he said quietly, "is that once the system accepts the story, it begins protecting itself." My throat tightened. "So what do we do?" Samuel hesitated. "That depends on how far you are willing to go. People who challenge this do not always lose in court. Sometimes they lose before they get there." He told me about a journalist who had started asking questions about a similar facility. One article published. 2 days later, he was dead in what had been ruled an unsolved hit and run. Then he slid a business card across the desk. "Jack Holloway, Private Investigations, former federal," Samuel said. "If anyone can get proof from inside that facility, it is him." I picked up the card and turned it over in my hand. Saving my son was no longer a matter of getting answers. It was a matter of surviving the questions. The man who told me to assume I was being watched. Jack Holloway arrived after sunset. No phone call, no warning. Just 2 flickers of my porch light, the signal Samuel had told me to expect. Jack was in his late 50s, gray at the temples, with the kind of eyes that never stopped scanning the edges of things. Before he stepped inside, he said, "Assume your house is already compromised." That sentence changed the way I breathed. I laid everything out on the table: the package, the photo, the videos, the trust, the facility records. Jack listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "This isn't one malicious spouse," he said. "It's a pipeline. Lawyers, doctors, administrators, facilities. Everyone gets paid. Everyone gets protected. Can you prove it?" He gave one short nod. "Yes. But once I start asking questions, they'll know you exist." "I already exist." "That's not what I mean." He pulled out his phone and turned it toward me. A message had come in 20 minutes earlier. "Stop digging. No sender. No explanation. Just a warning." Before he left, he paused at the door. "From this point on, the safest thing you can do is nothing," he said. Then he looked back at me. "The bravest thing is everything else." The woman who couldn't sleep anymore. She came to my house before sunrise 3 days later. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking hard enough she kept clasping them to stop it. "My name is Emily Foster," she said. "I'm a nurse at the facility." She did not sit down. "I can't testify," she said immediately. "I have a daughter." Then she slid a USB drive across my kitchen table. "Your son isn't impaired," she whispered. "He's been asking for you for months." "They won't let him call." I stared at her. "I made copies before I quit," she said. "I couldn't sleep anymore." She looked like someone whose conscience had finally outweighed her fear by half an ounce. "What's on it?" "Shift logs, medication refusals, altered evaluations, notes they never expected anyone outside administration to read. And one more thing." She swallowed. "A video call window they approved because they thought they could control it." The call lasted 6 minutes. That was all they allowed. 6 minutes to prove my son still existed. The screen flickered, then stabilized, and there he was, Daniel. Thinner than I remembered, shoulders drawn in like he had spent too long learning how little space he was allowed to take up. But his eyes were clear. "Dad," he said, not slurred, not confused, just tired. I could not answer at first. I was afraid speaking would break the moment apart. He asked about the children, about the old dog we had buried behind the shed, about whether the apple tree Margaret planted had ever fruited properly. Every question landed exactly where it should. This was not a man who had lost his mind. This was a man being managed. Someone stood just outside the frame, watching. Daniel noticed my hesitation. He lifted 2 fingers and tapped his chest twice, a signal from when he was a boy. "I'm here. I understand. Don't believe what you see around me." The call ended abruptly. I sat staring at the black screen with my own reflection floating in it. Fear gave way to certainty. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back. When the warning became personal, I could not stop thinking about Noah, the delivery driver, a man with a family, a man who had decided not to look away. Jack came by that afternoon without warning. "They closed his case fast," he said, standing by the window. "No toxicology review, no reconstruction worth the name. On paper, it's an accident. In practice, it's a message." I did not ask him to say more. I already understood. My phone buzzed that night. Another message from another number. "You're not as protected as you think." I did not answer. Instead, I walked slowly through my house, touching walls, door frames, photographs. I realized then that they were not merely watching me. They were measuring me. How much pressure it would take to make me stop. I stopped being afraid that night. Fear belongs to people who still believe retreat is possible. Once you understand there is no safe way back, fear gives way to something else. Clarity. And clarity is dangerous because it allows a man to know the cost and keep walking anyway. Where lies wore suits and spoke calmly. The courthouse did not look like a place where lives were destroyed. It looked clean, reassuring, neutral, flags, polished floors, filtered light. Lauren arrived 10 minutes early. Navy blazer, pearl earrings, hair pinned with careful restraint. She looked like the kind of woman people trust with school calendars and insurance decisions and emergency contacts. She did not look at me. Her attorneys did enough of that for her. When the hearing began, they did not call me a liar. They did not need to. They called me confused, grief-stricken, a father struggling to accept medical reality. They cited stress, selective judgment, emotional destabilization, concern for Daniel's well-being, standard phrases spoken gently enough to sound compassionate. Every word was a blade wrapped in velvet. When my turn came, I stood slowly. I felt every year of my age in my knees. I spoke about the package, the photograph, the monitored records, the video call, the inconsistencies. Lauren's lead attorney smiled politely. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "is it possible your grief has caused you to misinterpret what you believe you saw?" That was the trap. Not, "Are you lying? Are you broken?" I glanced at Lauren then. For the first time, she met my eyes. There was no fear in them, only confidence. She believed the system already belonged to her. Then Samuel stood. He did not speak immediately. He simply pressed a button. The screen behind us lit up. My kitchen, a timestamp in the corner. Lauren entering my house through the back door with a key she had never told me she possessed. A murmur moved through the courtroom. The first clip showed her photographing financial records in Margaret's study. The second showed her searching basement boxes. The third showed her opening locked drawers. The fourth showed her returning weeks later to do it again. By the third video, the room had gone silent. Lauren's attorney stood. Your Honor, this footage lacks context. The judge raised one hand. Sit down. He sat. Samuel's voice was steady. These recordings span 14 months. They show Mrs. Bennett entering Mr. Bennett's home repeatedly without his knowledge for the purpose of locating financial and trust documentation unrelated to her husband's medical treatment. For the first time, Lauren looked rattled. The judge turned toward her. Mrs. Bennett, can you explain why you repeatedly entered your father-in-law's house to photograph private records? Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since this began, the story was no longer hers to control. When my son finally walked into the light. The courtroom doors opened without ceremony, no announcement, no warning. They wheeled Daniel in, a chair he did not need, one final attempt to preserve the narrative. He looked thinner than he had on the call, paler. But when his eyes found mine, something hard and bright moved through them. He was still there. The judge turned toward the court-appointed psychiatrist standing beside him. Doctor, you have completed your evaluation? Yes, Your Honor. Your findings? He spoke plainly. Mr. Bennett is fully lucid. He understands his circumstances, communicates clearly, and shows no signs of the cognitive impairment described in earlier records. In my professional opinion, he does not require a guardian, and his continued confinement has no medical justification. A breath moved through the room. Not relief. Shock. Lauren's attorney rose again. Objection. Overruled, the judge said. Then she looked at my son. Mr. Bennett, do you understand why you are here today? Daniel's voice was rough from disuse, but steady. Yes, Your Honor. Do you understand the guardianship that was placed over you? Yes. And do you have anything you wish to say to this court? He did not look at Lauren when he answered. He looked at the judge. 3 years ago, he said, Lauren and I argued about money. My mother left me a protected trust. It couldn't be liquidated for speculative investments. Lauren wanted access to it immediately. I refused. He paused once, not for effect, but because memory has weight. We were at the top of the stairs. No one moved. She pushed me. The words did not need volume. I don't remember the fall, he went on. I remember waking up disoriented. By the time I was clear enough to understand what was happening, she had already begun telling doctors I was unstable, delusional, aggressive, incapable of making decisions. She obtained temporary guardianship before I could even understand the paperwork being used around me. He finally turned toward Lauren. I tried to tell people. Every call was monitored. Every visit was supervised. Every objection was written down as a symptom. I wasn't sick. I was inconvenient. For the first time, his voice cracked. I felt my hand close into a fist at my side. Not because I wanted violence, because I wanted time back. Samuel rose again. There is one final item for the court. He played the recording. Lauren's voice filled the room, sharp and unguarded, caught during a conversation she believed was private. When he fell, I saw an opportunity. No one moved. Control everything. Protect the children's inheritance from his weakness. He should have stayed confused. Silence followed. Real silence. The kind that settles only when a lie has died in public. The judge did not hesitate. This court is terminating the guardianship effective immediately. Then to Daniel, you are restored full legal autonomy as of this moment. Then to Lauren, and this court is ordering a full criminal investigation into the conduct described here today, including possible fraud, unlawful confinement, falsification of medical records, and financial exploitation. Lauren's face did not harden. It emptied, as if even she had not imagined the story ending without her inside it. What comes after the truth? Daniel came home 3 days later. No wheelchair, no escort, no dramatic scene. Just my son standing in the doorway, carrying a bag in one hand and uncertainty in the other, as if he still needed permission to step fully back into his own life. The house changed when he crossed into it. Warmer, smaller, human again. The children ran toward him at first, then stopped. They recognized his face, but not yet his voice. Healing does not rush. It stands at the threshold and waits to be invited in. That night we sat at the kitchen table together. The same table where Daniel had carved his initials. The same table where I had opened the package that split my life in two. We ate quietly, not awkwardly, carefully, like people handling something cracked and precious. Over the weeks that followed, life returned in pieces. Coffee on the porch, laughter in the hallway, the children learning how to be loud around him again. Daniel worked with a therapist. I did too. So did the children. Because even when truth wins, it leaves marks. Lauren was sentenced months later. Fraud, exploitation, assault, conspiracy involving falsified medical records. The facility shut down almost as quietly as it had operated. Locked doors, boxed files, administrators suddenly unavailable for comment. No satisfying spectacle. Just the dull administrative silence that so often follows great damage. That bothered me more than I expected. So much suffering, so little noise when it ended. One evening, Daniel and I sat outside watching the light fade behind the trees. The air was cool. The house behind us glowed softly through the windows. I used to think the worst part was being trapped, he said. I waited. It wasn't. What was? He looked out toward the yard. Realizing how easy it was for everyone to believe the wrong story. Polite lies sound safer than uncomfortable truths. That stayed with me because if I was honest, I had helped the lie live. I repeated it, defended it, used it to protect myself from asking the question that would have broken my peace sooner. And I paid for that comfort with years of my son's life. Now, when I think back to the beginning, I do not first remember the courtroom or the sentence or even the photograph in the package. I remember the quiet parts, Margaret's unease, the gaps in Daniel's silence, Lauren's reasonable answers, the version of events that was easiest to repeat. Stories like this do not begin with villains stepping into the light. They begin with something that feels slightly wrong, and someone deciding not to press. Love is often described as trust, but sometimes love is a harder thing. Sometimes it means asking the question that makes the whole room uncomfortable. Sometimes it means refusing the neat explanation. Sometimes it means becoming difficult in order to stay honest. Because the alternative is letting someone else write the story for you. And by the time you realize they have, the cost may already be sitting at your table, smiling at you, calling you family, and waiting for you never to ask the right question.